Once upon a time, there was a legendary group of adventurers who joined forces with monsters, and even though they were natural enemies, together they confronted numerous calamities. They were known as the Legion, and their leader was the translator of creations, none other than Cheyenne. This is the story of him and his companions. It all begins when they apologized to Cheyenne because they were going to expel him from the team he had been part of from the beginning. The protagonist doesn't understand after all, they had made a promise, but the leader of the Argonauts team, Jason, replies that he knew exactly the reason for this. Jason says that in his current state, Cheyenne wasn't good enough to be his companion. He was a hero and needed to get even stronger. Cheyenne replies that he understood that, but he was giving up everything he had with him because all of them were his childhood friends. Jason replies that even so, he wasn't good at all as a swordsman, much less in the sacred arts. Cheyenne's gift wasn't fit for combat, and he should at least think a little because he would only get in the way. Media asks him to take care of things from now on, and she says it clearly. With Cheyenne's current strength, he was just a burden to the group. The quest they had been on the day before was one in which Cheyenne had merely managed to hit the trolls. He agrees that it's true, but still, he fulfilled his role as bait so the others could act afterward. But it wasn't just about the troll case, they were talking about all the other battles as well. Cheyenne feels that now that he thought about it, none of the skills he had could help him land a decisive final blow. It wasn't that he neglected training, it was just that Cheyenne was never able to match Jason's swordsmanship. He could never use skills like an archmage like Medea, and could never even hope to use healing skills like Azu. Suppose his gift could only grow enough to be like that, Medea says that from now on they were going to work to become a ranked team. And Jason, being a hero, Cheyenne should understand that with the translator of creations as a gift, he couldn't stay with them and wouldn't be joining them anymore. The protagonist understands and agrees it seems that it had already been decided for him before they even talked, and he supposed Azu was aware. Jason agrees, stammering, and Medea mentions that it was probably a unanimous opinion after all. Medea thanks Cheyenne for all the service he brought to them so far, and the protagonist asks Jason to be careful not to overwork himself and Medea to take care of him. She agreed because after all, she was Jason's personal staff, but Jason yells that he didn't want to hear anything like that from Cheyenne, who was just a loser, and tells him to disappear. He yells at him to leave behind his items and gold, and Cheyenne replies that he knew that and would leave everything at the guild later. In this world, there was a profession called adventurer, and tasks were spread across various domains. A ranking system existed for adventurers, starting as apprentice, then beginner, novice, elite, hero, and finally becoming a legend. For an adventurer to reach class S or achieve something big like saving the world, there was something huge that only a legend could do. Standard adventurers wouldn't even stand a chance. And so the norm for them was only to aim to become a hero, a rank that even Cheyenne once wanted to achieve. The Argonauts team that Cheyenne had just been expelled from had rumors that it could become the B-ranked team closest to becoming a ranked team. Along with his childhood friends Jason and Peleus, they headed to the other side of the country. When they first met, they even thought goblins were challenging. Cheyenne covered for Jason, who quickly got angry. Along the way, they met Medea and quickly built their careers. But recently, their growth seemed to have hit a block, and the reason for that was the gift that Cheyenne possessed. The gift was a sudden ability that could awaken in people. Those who awakened the gift generally lived for it. Maybe his life could have been different if he hadn't become an adventurer in the first place. Things might have been better if his gift were more suitable for combat. But Cheyenne still wanted to be at his friend's side. Still, this was the result of his efforts. At the Adventurers Guild, everyone comments while laughing because they saw that it was Cheyenne from the former Argonauts group. They laugh because Cheyenne was finally kicked out. His translator ability in an elite team was ridiculous. They thought they finally found what made him a pitiful person. There was no doubt about it, but a woman asks everyone to stop fighting. This was Angelina, the receptionist of the Adventurers Guild, who greeted Cheyenne because she'd come to see him. She heard he was returning so they could speak privately. The protagonist handed over the funds and items that previously belonged to the Argonauts, and she agreed, saying he could rest assured that everything would be safely kept there. Angelina said that forcing him to return all those things was truly absurd. They should have reported it earlier. Cheyenne hated to admit it, but his party members were right. When it came to his battle abilities, he was more suited to a ranked E team. Angelina exclaimed that this wasn't true. From what she knew, whether solo or not, Cheyenne should at least be considered rank C. If he wished, she could even introduce him to another rank B team like the Argonauts, and Cheyenne felt like he might appreciate that. But at least for now, he preferred to start solo again, and she withdrew her hands, apologizing for making a quick judgment. He wanted time to reflect on his true abilities, but Angelina's words gave him courage. Angelina replied that in that case, there was a quest possibly waiting for him now. There had been a large number of emergency reports near the dungeon. She asked if Cheyenne could help eliminate them as usual. Just bringing their ears would be enough to count the coins. And he could also help if he would kindly inspect the dungeon with a special method. She intended to pay separately for that matter. Moreover, Angelina explained that she would say it as many times as needed. She knew how exhausted he must have been because of the team and the guild. Despite the hardship of the moment, happiness could certainly wait. Therefore, Angelina asked him to take it easy. Those were the words of a veteran inspector. Cheyenne thanked her, asking if they could go out to eat sometime, and grew nervous upon realizing what he had just said. She was surprised, replying that she had 2 conditions. The first was that he returned safely, and the second was that he take her somewhere nice. Cheyenne left quite happy, heading to find a route to the dungeon with the horses at the platform. Cheyenne had the gift of translation and could use it to speak with living creatures, even hearing the voices of animals like the horses. They commented on how cheerful the protagonist seemed and asked if something had happened, and Cheyenne agreed. Setting that aside, they just wanted to eat carrots and grass, and he ended up being teased by the animals. Any animal, excluding humans and even including monsters, could be understood by Cheyenne. If only he could make this gift comparable to Jason's swordsmanship in combat. Maybe then he wouldn't have been forgotten and left behind by others like that. Cheyenne entered the carriage, asking for permission, and noticed that inside there was a girl who also seemed to be a solo adventurer. The men around asked her if she was alone and suggesting she could go with them since she could share with them. And obviously, they were inviting her for the night as well, now quite excited since the sword-wielding girl looked attractive. She laughed and apologized, saying she had no intention of working with people weaker than her. Even goblins knew better when it came to speaking to girls. The men grew furious and stood up, but before Cheyenne could even do anything to stop the chaos, she knocked the man down as if it were nothing. She pointed her sword at him, asking if he didn't feel sick yet. A little more and he'd never breathe that disgusting breath again. The man stammered that he was just joking, and Cheyenne watched, shocked, because her movements were even faster than Jason's. She noticed she was being watched and said he'd be congratulated by other adventurers, but Cheyenne felt she was saying he'd be targeted. He replied that he'd keep that in mind even though he didn't understand what she meant, and the protagonist just stayed quiet during the trip. They continued on their way. Cheyenne decided to set those things aside because for now, he needed to make it all worthwhile. Cheyenne approached inside the cave, introducing himself, and something within sensed it was him after so long, asking how he was that day. The one who answered was a slime named Lime, and Cheyenne replied that he was in the middle of a solo skill test. Lime asked if that meant he'd be like that from now on, and he said not forever. Lime wanted to come along if possible, since the others wouldn't be joining that annoying blonde guy and the irritating girl in the robe. She wanted to go on an adventure with him. Cheyenne felt touched by that, but it seemed Lime was just interested in saving a damsel in distress and indulging in her own fantasies. In the end, Lime joined the group so they could move forward, and she asked where they should be heading. He replied that there was a massive message of distress calls because orcs had been appearing suddenly, and he was going to investigate. Cheyenne asked if she knew anything, and Lime replied that as far as she could remember, the orcs had recently changed leadership. Rumors said the new chief held a grudge against humans, and now even those who usually didn't leave their hideouts were heading to the dungeon. Therefore, Cheyenne should be very careful. Now he knew that the orcs' activities must have changed very recently. If that were the case, then Cheyenne should keep his eyes wide open to continue investigating, and he was glad because at least he could remain cautious. There were 3 goblins ahead, not something he couldn't handle, but it probably meant more trouble was coming. Cheyenne said he would attack them, and Lime got ready too. She hated them because they always attacked her as soon as she was spotted. The protagonist attacked with his sword and finished quickly. Lime said it wasn't bad at all. It looked like his skills had improved again. Cheyenne laughed, replying that maybe it used to be the case, but now they'd be relying on each other to handle the matters they discussed before moving on. As they walked further, Cheyenne noticed that suddenly several men were gathered and asked what that was about. They laughed when they saw Cheyenne looking so calm. Those were the same men from the previous carriage. They were still laughing because the protagonist acted like a rank B. Cheyenne replied that he didn't remember getting involved with any of them, but it looked like the guy who fought him in the bar earlier was also there. The men told the protagonist to shut up. That leader from Shin's team had been mocking them the whole time, and now that he was alone, he should pay for those words. That's the kind of bad impression Jason left behind, but Cheyenne wasn't expecting to hear his name again so soon after being expelled from the group. But facing a group solo like this seemed like an easy way to embarrass someone, even if they held a grudge like that. Things like this were what adventurers of rank C had to expect. That said, facing 8 at once was a bit much. Cheyenne asked if it was really okay. If they could remember, the guild forbade conflicts between adventurers, and they laughed because it wasn't even an actual rule. After all, nothing could be reported if he died, and Cheyenne said that if that was the case, there shouldn't be any room for mercy. Cheyenne stomped the ground and lit up the area. They complained that the protagonist startled him like that, but he couldn't do anything, being just a translator. Cheyenne decided he should show them how a translator could fight, but the other men thought it was a huge bluff and charged at him. Lime apologized for making them all wait. She had brought the orc horde to them, and the true hero of the day had arrived. Cheyenne realized he had managed to lead everything quite well until then. The group of rank C orcs pointed at the humans and declared they would kill them. Immediately, the men suggested to Cheyenne that they should form a team for now, and obviously the protagonist agreed. He didn't plan to die there in the first place, but clearly those men had no shame. There were 15 of them. If they were really going to fight back, they should be able to push through. If he let them all die there, it would leave a bad taste in his mouth. As long as Xian provided support, he'd find an opportunity to escape once things calmed down. Xian told the men not to let their guard down, pointing at the leader of the group who was in the back and ordered them to attack from a distance. It was time to wrap things up there, but suddenly he noticed something strange. There were bats around, and he asked if they had been drawn there. Lime could feel the battle. Looked like the great orc was coming. The most powerful one of all was there and drew everyone's attention. It was true that it would be a grand statement, but for normal humans, his words were completely incomprehensible. The men were immediately attacked by the massive orc, and Xian was shocked because it was an instant death for a rank C person. It couldn't be that this orc was a gift bearer. Right then, he stared at the protagonist with that terrifying gaze. He could tell from Xian's movements that he was the strongest one there and charged at him without hesitation. Xian defended himself with his sword, and the orc was shocked that he had blocked his attack. Not bad at all, actually. He ended up having to kick Lime off his foot because she clung to it. He even managed to tame his slime. He had clearly caught the orc's attention. Xian was surprised. It could be possible that this orc was even stronger than Jason after all. But suddenly, the same swordswoman from before appeared to interfere in the battle, catching Xian off guard with her arrival. She said that just as she thought, he was able to hear the prophecy correctly and asked Xian if his savior was really doing well. The protagonist thanked her for the help but was confused about what she meant by him being a savior. It was a beautiful scene that appeared before Xian. Red hair like fire came into view, and then she appeared. It was the same girl from the carriage earlier. The orc was surprised that a human girl had repelled his attack, but it wasn't bad at all. He couldn't say he appreciated the interruption in his battle, but he could feel that fighting her would bring great joy. The woman asked what that orc was rambling about so much. She hoped it was just a reaction to her battle spirit. Xian wondered if that orc was actually a complete idiot. The woman replied it was a shame, but she got to finish things quickly. Xian was surprised because her attack was blocked, and now the two were really enjoying the fight. They kept exchanging blows and felt that they were exceeding each other's expectations in combat. Xian realized they were both monstrously powerful. He wanted to help but couldn't even find an opening. The orc had never thought that woman could last so long against him and asked her to tell him her name. Xian noticed that the girl had purposely taken the hit and wondered what she was planning now. She used an explosion spell, and Xian was impressed. That power wasn't even an enchantment. He wondered if she had defeated the orc. Blind would bet he wouldn't be able to endure that. Xian was relieved because she was safe. But the orc was still in one piece, and it seemed like he was only now revealing a fraction of his strength, charging at her again. But once again, she knocked his sword away with one move and even ripped off his arm, shocking both Xian and Lime, who could only watch. The battle continued, and the orc said that no one had ever dodged his attacks before. The human woman was truly impressive. The swordswoman also acknowledged that he was good. He managed to overcome it all quite well, despite everything. Lime noticed something was wrong because the swordswoman started struggling during the fight. Despite his heavy wounds, he seemed to be growing even stronger. Lime knew this could be terrible for the swordswoman. The madness reached the point where the orc killed one of his own allies just to keep fighting her. That was his battle style. He didn't want anyone to get in his way. Xian thought this might be what one would call a warrior's pride. The two stared at each other for a moment, and the orc apologized for causing her trouble. Xian told the warrior orc that he wanted to talk to him. The woman didn't understand what he was suddenly talking about since speaking with a monster wasn't possible. But Xian replied that he could handle it. The orc asked if he intended to bother him too, and Xian answered no. He wanted to treat his wounds and reschedule the duel. That was his proposal. The swordswoman was confused by what she was hearing, but Xian asked her to just wait and watch. Xian helped tend to the injury, saying that if his wounds weren't healed, he would definitely die. But with his healing spell, at least he could live to fight another day, and he asked what the orc thought about that. The orc was quite happy with that. Xian said he couldn't restore the blood, unfortunately, and he shouldn't overexert himself. The orc realized that too late. It seemed he was even more of an idiot than Xian had initially thought. Xian said he should make sure not to die before they could see each other again. The two shook hands and said goodbye. When they exited the dungeon, the swordswoman asked what she had just witnessed, and Xian replied that it was just a negotiation. He apologized because he had made a post-battle agreement but promised that the two could fight again if they let them leave. But in truth, she was more surprised that he could talk to monsters, and he replied that his gift allowed him to communicate with anything that had consciousness. She was impressed, and Xian nervously said it was just a simple thing. It was just a shame that such a gift belonged to someone like him. He had even ended up being expelled from the party he was previously working with and had now become a solo adventurer. But receiving praise from someone like her made him happy, and she replied that she actually had a gift too, and asked if by any chance her voice didn't sound different. The protagonist mentioned that he could hear two voices overlapping, and Xian felt that must have been it. Thanks to that, he had been saved twice, and it was because of her, which made the swordswoman emotional because she could really hear his voice. She hugged him happily because she had finally found her savior. Xian got distracted because her scent was actually nice. But then he noticed that Lime was between them in the hug. The girl apologized because she got carried away by emotions. She introduced herself as Cassandra, a B-rank demonic oracle, and Cheyenne replied that it wasn't her fault and introduced himself to her as well. Cassandra was a cool name and Cheyenne complimented her because of that. Then the girls suggested that they could work together as a team since both were solo. Cheyenne was surprised to hear that. Later, the protagonist returned to the guild headquarters. Angelina now saw that the change in leadership among the orcs had reinvigorated the whole group, but she thanked him because now they knew the orc had a gift too. With Cheyenne's information, they might be able to create new operations so they could handle things together. It would be a pressure operation. There was a guild announcement coming soon, and when it happened, it would be good for the protagonist to join in. Things would get pretty intense this time. Thinking about it, Cheyenne wondered where those other guys who were left behind had gone. Cheyenne asked if Angelina knew whether those guys from the other day had come back, and she replied that unfortunately, she hadn't heard anything from any of them. They were just average rank people, so she believed they couldn't afford to be careless and asked if something might have happened. If anything had happened, they would be with Cheyenne, and he replied that they just happened to cross paths in the dungeon. Angelina said that if he was saying so, she supposed there wasn't much she could do to worry about it. But still, she asked a bit annoyed about the girl he brought back from the dungeon. Maybe he was hitting on other girls down there. He should know better than anyone that going into the dungeon looking for love wasn't very smart, and Cheyenne quickly apologized because it wasn't like that at all. She simply helped when he was in danger, and then he changed the subject, asking if there was any information about Cassandra. She checked that according to guild reports, Cassandra the Calamity was quite famous in that region. She was a solo B-rank adventurer with blood-red hair, a swordswoman who carried a sword called a katana. Even when she challenged high-level dungeons with a team, Cassandra had never failed to return alone. Angelina mentioned that Cassandra was certainly skilled. Maybe it wasn't wise to join a team with her. Besides that, there were dark rumors about her, but they always just heard that where there were footsteps, there were monsters. It was a popular phrase meaning that rumors often held some truth, and Cheyenne thanked Angelina because she still told him more about her. The protagonist thought Cassandra must have had her own reasons, but she didn't seem like a bad person anyway. Cheyenne would need to confirm things for himself. Even if he ended up being wrong, he just wanted to say that he misjudged her character. Then Angelina changed the subject and went back to the first topic about when they scheduled a date. The work there was less busy than before, so it would probably be easier for them to go out. Cheyenne asked if she really wanted to go out with just the two of them, and she agreed. After all, Cheyenne was always helping her, and it seemed like he could handle things so well that he had been sold off. Now they could celebrate. Cheyenne was really happy and was ready to pick her up later. He couldn't even believe that youth was finally catching up to him. He hadn't met any girl who would go on a date with him before. As far as he remembered, Asu was the only girl. And during his time with the Argonauts, the girls only had eyes for Jason, but Angelina was really kind to everyone. Actually, Cheyenne started to wonder if maybe she was just being professional, and he kept thinking about that for a while. Until the protagonist returned to Cassandra and apologized because he had taken a while. She replied that she didn't mind. She had been checking out the guilds around the new cities and gave him a sense of what kind of place this was. Then she asked Cheyenne why he was smiling and if something good had happened. He tried to pull himself together to act normal and stop smiling. But changing the subject, Cheyenne mentioned he highly recommended the local herbs and pork seasoning, and Cassandra agreed. It sounded fantastic. Cheyenne felt that her mood was unusually good and asked what her favorite food was. She replied that it had been a while since she'd eaten with someone, and she was just a little excited, though she didn't know if it was weird. Cheyenne ended up deciding to pay for the food himself. He hoped it would help Cassandra feel comfortable. Now they could discuss their teams somewhere else after dinner, and so they first decided to review their guild cards. She seemed hesitant but didn't say why. It might have been better to explain it another way so Cheyenne could understand the issue. There was nothing but super rare skills. Cheyenne couldn't even read the description of that gift. They were abilities never seen before, and it looked like she had mixed blood. There were two things Cassandra wanted to explain to Cheyenne. The first was about her hair. One could tell she wasn't of pure blood just by that. That was because demon blood ran through her veins. Cheyenne asked if it was the same demons he had heard so much about. Demons possessed great strength that rivaled even monsters. They were said to be descendants of gods who fought for world domination and fell. Even today, only a small number of them existed, and their unimaginable power had etched itself into legends. They existed but had become reclusive. Cheyenne had never even seen a demon in his life, and yet that blood now flowed through her body. Now Cheyenne could understand she was half demon. As a frontline fighter, she must have had the best skills. Her ability to see the future also applied to combat. Besides that, Cassandra was beautiful. Forming a team with her would certainly be a blessing. She said the other important thing was about her gift, called the Demonic Oracle, which had two abilities. It allowed her to read a few seconds into the future, and Cheyenne acknowledged that it was indeed useful. She agreed her gift had no weakness. But then Cheyenne heard a second voice say that there was, in fact, a weakness behind her gift, contradicting what she said. Cassandra said that's how she had survived for so long, but in truth, the future she saw through her gift was falsely convenient for others. Just like last time, if she tried to warn someone about destruction, That person would only hear good things and not her warning. It was a gift she couldn't conveniently use for others. She was unable to communicate properly with them. Cheyenne knew that his gift translated lies into truths. That's why he could always hear her two voices overlapping. Cassandra was very happy about that. If he could hear a prophecy correctly, he could save lives she had never been able to because of her gift. That's why Cheyenne was considered a savior to her, and she asked what he thought about that. Frankly, her gift could only cause problems for others, and she could be judged just because of her appearance. But Cassandra was confident in her physical abilities and thought it could work really well if she teamed up with the protagonist. She said she could do anything to work with Cheyenne as long as he accepted any terms. She could even offer rewards. But Cheyenne was looking at her seriously. He said they could form a team under one condition. Cassandra agreed to whatever it was, but if it was that bothersome, she would even dye her hair. Cheyenne didn't understand why. He liked her hair color because it looked like fire. He couldn't help but say he was enchanted when she saved him. She was surprised to hear someone liked her hair. It was kind of strange because it wasn't a natural color to most people. It was proof that she wasn't of pure blood, but Cheyenne replied that he thought it was very beautiful and reminded her that he was the kind of guy who made teams with slimes too. It didn't bother the protagonist that she had demon blood. Thanks to his gift, he knew even monsters could be good guys. What mattered to Cheyenne was the kind of person someone was deep down, but Cassandra felt like that was even worse. She was sure they must have heard her other name. Cheyenne knew it was about that so-called calamity. Cheyenne agreed, but he also knew that even though her gift constantly got her involved in misunderstandings, she still tried to warn him of danger. She fought against an orc who had a gift in order to save him, and even now she revealed the truth about herself to ensure he could trust her. That's why Cheyenne felt he could trust her, but beyond that, she was certainly a good person. When Cassandra realized she could speak her prophecies thanks to her gift, she was more than happy to save lives rather than clear her name. To him, she seemed like the type of character from heroic tales. Cassandra got embarrassed from receiving such praise, but thanked him anyway. And she asked what condition he intended to impose on the situation. He replied that she could save him from being her savior. But that wasn't what he wanted to be. If they were to be a team, they needed to stand on equal ground. He didn't mind sharing rewards, and they could discuss quests before choosing. And Cheyenne would like to create a relationship with her where they could always help each other, not a matter of individual trust. He wanted them to be equals in that. That's why he didn't want to be her savior, but rather preferred to be her battle companion. Cassandra asked if that was all he wanted, and Cheyenne replied that it was the only thing that truly mattered. But since he was the weakest among them, he would end up taking care of the simpler tasks, and Cassandra offered to help him train. After all, they were partners now, but her training would be quite strict, so he should prepare in advance. Even if he ended up crying and begging, she had no intention of leaving him behind, and so time passed until the next day. Angelina smiled when she found out they were forming a team, even if Cheyenne felt something odd in that cheerful mood. But she shut him down because she understood he was an adventurer, and she was a guild receptionist and nothing more. She supposed he couldn't think of it any other way. Cheyenne felt that was true because he'd been warned, but rumors were just rumors. Even so, Cassandra couldn't understand why she was looking at him like he was a piece of trash. Angelina said Cassandra was a solo B rank, while the womanizer, or rather Cheyenne, was C rank, so she was going to offer him a certification test. The protagonist realized he'd be mistreated forever because of this, but Angelina believed the two of them could handle the job. If they completed their request, their team would be officially ranked as B. Cassandra was excited, even if Cheyenne was still downcast. Still, out of curiosity, Angelina asked how they ended up forming a team, even though he had refused her advice after all. She was curious to know if Cheyenne had hit on her or something like that, and he quickly replied that it wasn't like that. Cassandra said that Cheyenne had intended to go solo and apologized because it was actually she who insisted, and Angelina was clearly bothered by the situation. And above all, Cassandra didn't believe that Cheyenne was trash or anything like that. He even praised her the previous night. And the protagonist was a bit shocked because he was only making his own reputation worse instead of improving it. Anyway, Cassandra said that even if he were trash, she wouldn't call him that, and Angelina asked more about that so-called previous night. It seemed they had spent day and night together. Surely he knew how to get along with girls. And she asked if he got along that well with Asura back in the Argonauts too. Cheyenne wanted to explain, but Angelina told him to shut up because a piece of trash talking would only spread the stench further around. And it wasn't like he had teamed up with her just because her hair was pretty. Cassandra mentioned that his words the night before were nice, but now it sounded like a lie. Cheyenne tried to redeem himself because it wasn't a lie or anything like that, which only enraged Angelina, who told the two of them to go flirt somewhere else because she was very busy. Anyway, they ended up accepting the job proposal and Cheyenne hurried to leave, but Angelina waved and asked him to at least come back safely. Trolls were known as the final wall for C-rank adventurers. They were stronger and more terrifying than orcs. The most annoying part about them was their bothersome regenerative ability. Anything less than a killing blow, and they would heal instantly. Back when he was in the Argonauts, Medea used her powerful magic to wipe them out with a single hit. They didn't have high magical power or any effective ability, but with Cassandra's superior swordsmanship and the high quality of her sword, they might have a chance. Cheyenne wondered how he could buy time so that she could defeat them, and asked her how long it would take to kill one. She replied that it would take only 5 seconds, which caught him by surprise, but Cassandra said she could quickly take out 2, so Cheyenne could at least take care of 1. He thought that should work eventually, but Cheyenne couldn't even picture himself fighting alone. Cassandra assured him he would be fine, however, she would help if necessary, but he could believe that he was capable of defeating it. Just as mentioned before, Cassandra took down 2 in just a couple of seconds, and Cheyenne pointed at the 3rd one still alive to draw her attention. His partner had placed her faith in him. Cheyenne had to manage it. He just had to stay focused to fulfill what he promised he would do. Thanks to this sword attack, the protagonist realized he had taken the creature down, but Cassandra shouted to warn him it was still alive. He had to keep pressing while it was weakened, so he continued attacking until he finally managed to kill it, even if he was gasping from exhaustion. Cassandra ran to him because he had done it. Using fire in a battle like that was more than she expected, which is why she praised his great work. Cheyenne laughed. He himself was surprised by everything that had happened, but was grateful for the lessons he had with her. The two returned to the guild, and another receptionist confirmed they had successfully defeated the stone troll. She congratulated them because now he was officially part of a rank B team. Angelina was tied up with another task, but she would certainly be happy to hear about it. Cheyenne hoped so since Angelina had done so much for him. The woman wasn't sure if he had heard, but a major quest would soon be opened. It had been decided based on the information from the lead adventurer. The guild was short-handed and needed to start calling rank B members. The one who caused a stir by speaking like that was none other than Jason, who suddenly appeared. It had been a while, and he greeted Medea too. Jason thought Cheyenne would be wandering around crying and begging to reunite, yet he still managed to team up with a woman, and not bad at all. Cassandra asked if the protagonist knew that rude man, and he replied that he was the leader of the Argonauts, his former group. Jason laughed and agreed, claiming he was the great hero Jason. But Cassandra laughed too. He wasn't even worthy of Cheyenne's effort to be called a hero. That made him furious, almost starting a fight right then and there. Medea asked Jason to calm down and held him back. He asked if she really thought he could lose to that woman and wondered if it was because this went against guild rules. Medea denied it. It was because the red-haired girl was a solo rank B adventurer called Cassandra Calamity. Jason grumbled that she was an assassin, and Cassandra was shocked at what she heard, trying to say that it wasn't like that at all. Cheyenne was the one who stepped up to his former companion, demanding what he had just said and telling him to apologize to her. Cheyenne didn't care about being called an idiot all the time, but he couldn't forgive insults toward his companion now. Jason responded that it was just what everyone called her and wanted him to say it was wrong when that was her reputation. Cheyenne stated that the fact he was still alive was all the proof he needed. Jason said he must have just fallen for her charms, but the argument was going nowhere. He suggested settling it with a duel, and Cheyenne accepted on the spot, but Cassandra asked him to wait a moment. That was because she wanted to handle it with her own hands. A protagonist grew worried about her. After all, he knew Cassandra's swordsmanship was well known and of high quality, but he still feared the outcome. She replied that it was all the more reason to make it work. It was for both of their honors still on the line. Jason laughed, saying letting a girl take the lead was such a ridiculous sight. Cassandra responded that he could keep barking as much as he wanted. Meanwhile, she told Cheyenne he should just cheer for her, and he even decided they could place a bet on the battle. The others started betting, and everyone got ready for the fight. Jason prepared to battle, and Medea was uneasy about what awaited him. The spectators shouted at him to take care of Cassandra, calling her an assassin, and he said he knew very well about her gift. Since he was a gentleman, he would let her make the first move, and naturally Cassandra agreed. She would take full advantage of it. She launched a direct attack on Jason, which caused a huge explosion, sending him flying across the area. Everyone watching was shocked, and Medea rushed over to check if he was okay. Around them, people stood in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. She really was something. They called her a thief because her title only served her too well. Angelina came running, asking what that thing was that went flying, and the other receptionist ran into her arms while she wanted to know what happened. Cheyenne decided to explain, and now Angelina could understand, but there was still something she needed to talk about, and she asked him to come with her. They went to a private room to talk. Angelina said that the other day, some adventurers went into the same dungeon they had gone into. And just a short while ago, they came back alive. When they arrived, one of them only said that it was the orcs who did all of it, but he ended up falling unconscious and was now in the infirmary. After putting all the reports together to gather more information, they now understood well. The guild would be starting an emergency mission to immediately go after the orcs and deal with the situation. To begin that mission, they needed to prepare for the final investigations before they could start. That's why Angelina wanted to ask the two of them for more details about what happened inside the cave the other day. Cheyenne agreed to tell her everything. Emergency missions were just one of the various things adventurers were asked to do. Unlike other requests that could be accepted voluntarily, emergency ones were issued at the guild's discretion, and they sent certain hand-picked adventurers to take care of those things. They were nominated and couldn't refuse without a solid reason. This meant it was a crisis of such magnitude that it might be approaching their town. Angelina thanked them because they had provided the proper explanation, but regarding the individuals from before, they had also gone in. It was best to believe there was a gift bearer within the orc horde, increasing and enhancing their abilities. Shagan asked if that could mean there was an orc king. Cassandra asked if he knew the details about this change in their behavior, and he agreed since he had read a bit about it in old documents at the guild some time ago. Many decades ago, in a dungeon, an army led by an orc king from a certain cave advanced toward a town. Despite the numbers, they surrounded the surrounding area with a massive force. The guild was present at that time, centered with several A-rank adventurers, and all of them went in for the subjugation without much difficulty. But it ended up resulting in the loss of 2 cities and many lives. That was the story that ended up spreading. Cassandra realized that an enemy, even A-rank people, had trouble responding to was truly serious. Angelina didn't think so badly of an orc king, but it was definitely a big threat, so they needed to take care of the group as quickly as possible before its power spread. Cheyenne replied that if that was the case, he asked to let the 2 of them cooperate together too. Cassandra agreed. It was perfect for their first job now that they had been promoted to rank B. Angelina thanked them, because that was exactly what she had hoped to say. Now they could focus on the details before the announcement they had just received, and so a few days passed since that conversation. Back at the guild, dozens of people had gathered, and Cheyenne entered, hearing people comment about how Cassandra was the one who defeated Jason. The protagonist whispered to her that she had been getting quite a bit of attention lately, and she replied that actually it had been the 2 of them. Angelina greeted the 2 of them with a smile. They had received a request from the guild to participate in an emergency mission and asked what they planned to do. Cheyenne and Cassandra replied excitedly that of course they would participate. It was like their second home, and they could never refuse such a request. Besides, if they were going to defeat a monster that bore a gift, they would have to earn a special reward. That's why Cassandra was excited. Around them, people commented among themselves about why the 2 of them were getting involved too. But of course, all of this only drew more attention. Jason soon showed up all excited, saying that he would be participating too. Jason and the Golden Brigade, led by the Argonauts, would be joining them as well. They could just show Cassandra how things were done this time. Adventurers were the type to work together like that. In his team now, there was also the C-rank beast hunter Theseus, and also Adeline, also C-rank. Cassandra laughed, saying her sore loser was making a lot of noise, but she couldn't even ask Cheyenne to translate a dog's barking for her. Jason got annoyed and promised he would make her regret all of that later, and told everyone they should go hold the strategy meeting once and for all. They wanted to deal with the gift bearer in the conference room. Several people gathered, including the magical swords Pollux and Castor, both C-rank. The 2 of them ran to greet Cheyenne. He had heard they had been promoted to rank C and congratulated them for it. Pollux thanked him, and they even got permission to name their own team for the guild. Cheyenne praised them because they had really grown a lot, and he was happy that the 2 had worked so hard. Castor started complaining that he didn't want to hear any moral lectures, but Pollux shut him up with a strike right away. She smiled and asked Cheyenne to tell him about the time he fought against the gift holder inside the dungeon. Cassandra grew concerned, asking if Castor was really okay, and Cheyenne replied that he'd been watching them since they were just beginners, so he was used to their behavior. But it seemed like outsiders might still be shocked. And then he explained how the gift holder was beyond his capabilities. His presence was clearly different from the others. If one were to meet him, they should flee immediately and never engage. Castor began calling Cheyenne a weakling, and Pollux silenced him with just a look. Cassandra laughed. It was a strange kind of relationship. But in the end, it seemed like the 2 got along very well. The positive and energetic Pollux and the foul-mouthed but cautious Castor. They complemented each other. Cassandra even felt a bit envious. Cheyenne replied that some things couldn't be imitated even if one tried. But they could build a good bond as companions in their own way, and she agreed, so they should continue with the group meeting. The formation for the Force expedition involved being divided into an escort team, followed by the Rank C advanced group and the Rank B main force. The escort team was investigating the area, and the purpose of the meeting was to form a main force, which was the special unit. There was a limitation to the number of carriages that could carry people and supplies. They were of the rank meant to be part of the main force. But Cheyenne was a little worried about Lime. He would consult them to see if they could go ahead with the team and find out more about the situation inside the dungeon in advance. Cassandra and Cheyenne were excited to take them down, and so they all boarded the carriages and wagons heading to battle. Cassandra commented that the twins and Cheyenne seemed very close, and he agreed. In fact, it all started when he was teaching some trainees. She was surprised because he could do so many things far beyond a standard adventurer. Sometimes Cheyenne spoke with animals and even with other monsters, but the trust of the guild and the city always came first. Once, while he was talking to a goblin, he was attacked by some adventurers who mistook him for a monster, and after that, he panicked. But it was thanks to that incident that Cheyenne gained the trust of many people. The next day, the blacksmith even let him have a mithril sword, which conducts magical power easily. Cassandra was impressed, and Cheyenne replied that it wasn't even originally part of his own strength. If not for his senior who got him involved in training, he didn't even know what he would have done to change things from that point on. She asked if that person was also an adventurer, and he said yes, but not anymore. But as Cheyenne partner, Cassandra would do her best not to damage his reputation in any way. Later, everyone gathered at the guild camp and Cheyenne asked how the twins were doing. Pollux turned around all cheerful, while Castor looked annoyed. The protagonists knew they must be nervous, but there was no need to rush. If they encountered a powerful enemy, they could just run away immediately. Their job was only to survive and bring back information. Castor didn't want to hear any of that. But Pollux quickly shut him up again because he was always interrupting her important conversations with Cheyenne. She thanked him sincerely but also asked that they be careful and not worry too much. In return, Pollux wanted to ask a favor and Cheyenne replied that if it was within his ability, he would make it happen. Castor got nervous, but she just ignored him and walked off, saying she'd talk about it once all this was over. Cassandra wondered if those kids would really be okay after everything. Cheyenne said they both had gifts and he could vouch for their abilities. Their cooperation was quite unique in both skill and personality, and ordinary rank C adventurers couldn't beat them so easily. But if she was curious, she could just ask the two directly. Now they could go on with their own roles. In the dungeon, Cheyenne asked Lion if anything had changed, and he got nervous, saying that actually everything had changed. Many humans were coming. The orcs were digging holes everywhere. Lion got worried when they entered his home, and his prices ended up becoming complicated. Cheyenne said the guild was moving forward with this subjugation. Even the slimes would end up being killed along the way. But you didn't need to worry because Cheyenne would make sure Lime stayed well hidden, though he wondered if the orcs could really dig holes. He never thought they had that kind of intelligence or habits, but more importantly, Lime even wanted to say something important too, but got distracted by Cassandra. Actually, Pollux thought she was quite lucky. Her village was destroyed by goblins and she had no choice but to become an adventurer. Both she and her brother were blessed with gifts and abilities, so they had no trouble surviving. But she herself had lost the purpose of her entire life, and it was Cheyenne who always gave her hope. Not as a child who lost her hometown, but as an adventurer, she was recognized for who she was. The words he gave her still offered support. On this subjugation, she might actually be useful somehow. Castor took care of healing Pollux's wounds and she thanked him for the care. He understood how she felt, but they were in enemy territory, so they had to stay focused. She agreed she'd be more careful, but suddenly they came across a huge horde of orcs, and they desperately used magic against them. Meanwhile, Cheyenne realized there were too many enemies coming and the bats wouldn't stop showing up. Cassandra wondered if things would be okay like this. The guild people always seemed quite irritated with the situation. It was nothing compared to their own lives, yet Cheyenne was still concerned about the incomprehensible behavior of the orcs they had mentioned earlier. And above all, she should have seen that if they couldn't act like a team now, then there was no point in working together. Cassandra agreed, now they could take care of it and then apologize together for causing trouble to everyone else. Up ahead, they found goblins, but they could capture them without needing to kill them, so Cheyenne asked where the humans inside had gone. The goblins pointed out where they had gone, but it still seemed like they were struggling. Cheyenne soon heard sounds of battle, and they needed to move closer. They approached quickly after Cassandra took care of the goblins before he could even see them. Castor and Pollux were fighting alone against the horde of orcs, but there were too many monsters and no end in sight. Castor told his sister to be careful because he was going to create an opening, and she asked what he was talking about all of a sudden. At that pace, at least two of them could handle things on their own. Castor was willing to sacrifice himself to save his sister. Cassandra appeared quickly and killed the monsters before anything worse could happen after all. Cheyenne asked if they were okay, but said they could leave things to them, and he tried talking to the orcs. If they didn't want to be wiped out, they should retreat and hide, but the orcs could only focus on killing humans. Cheyenne realized they probably couldn't understand his words. They also didn't seem to be moving on their own will. The protagonist was still impressed, but at the very least they needed to focus on getting out of there, and he helped the two kids to their feet. Cheyenne said he'd come online to look after them, while he started killing several other orcs. With that kind of power and magic, it might work against gift bearers, and then he checked how Cassandra was doing. But as expected, there was no need to worry about her. It was nothing for her to handle that kind of situation. Cassandra said there was no reaction from her gift either. Cheyenne mentioned that their movements were also really strange for orcs. He was still having a bad feeling about it. The protagonist approached to help Pollux, who was on the ground not knowing if she was dreaming or not. He'd offered her something to drink and she complained because it tasted bad, but Cheyenne was relieved because she seemed fine. Even so, she was still worried about her brother's condition until she realized he was just enchanted by Cassandra. The two of them thanked him a lot for the help, and Cheyenne said that thanks to them, they had managed to arrive in time. Cassandra agreed. They were able to help them just in time and praised them for managing well on their own until then. Pollux apologized, but she'd need to return and report back to headquarters, and they agreed, since they couldn't fall for the same trap twice. The two of them left the place, and Cheyenne told them to make sure to check the area. That's when they found Lime because he had something he wanted to show them. When they went to the back of the cave, they found that same orc from before. It was Schwein, who was there injured and alone. Cassandra began talking about that guy from before, and Cheyenne knew this was the same gift holder from earlier, Schwein. Lime asked if he could heal Schwein's wounds since he couldn't take care of everything by himself. Shen didn't understand why they would help instead of attacking and finishing off the orcs, so Lime explained that Schwein had been attacked by the other group of orcs he was actually a part of. He was like Lime, and Shine decided he would take care of treating the guy's wounds, but that only made Cassandra more worried. He said that if they ended up being attacked, she should be ready to deal with them, but Cassandra found it strange to act that way toward an enemy. Cheyenne mentioned that Lime had said this injured one was harmed by his own kind, so he would treat him as requested. He might just be feeling pity for someone in the same situation as him. It was an old story, but if they could get more information about their enemies, it would be better than simply letting him die. Cassandra sighed, realizing she couldn't stop it, and besides, she also thought Schwein might have something important to say. Cheyenne thanked her for understanding, and Cassandra said that if anyone else had said that, she'd think it was madness. But since he was her partner, she'd trust his judgment. The protagonist felt a bit nervous from hearing something so embarrassing, but in any case, they could get started right away. He would focus on treating those wounds, and Lime was impressed because the healing magic was actually working quickly. Cheyenne said that actually it wasn't his own healing magic since he couldn't do anything like that. Cassandra had never seen anything like it either. It seemed to be part of Schwein's own gift, and soon he woke up, recognizing the two who stood in front of him. Lime explained that they weren't bad humans. Schwein couldn't understand what was being said, but he remembered being helped by him in the past, so he thanked the slime for that. Schwein got up, feeling his body and recognizing that Cheyenne had saved him a second time. The protagonist hadn't expected to meet him again like this. Schwein was impressed facing the woman he had fought the last time too. But he didn't intend to fight without repaying his debt, and promised he would take care of the debts he owed. Cheyenne could ask anything he wanted. After that, he wished to fight on equal terms. Cheyenne was a bit surprised that Schwein really wanted to fight Cassandra so badly. She asked what was wrong, and the protagonist said that Schwein wanted to continue the fight from the other day, but now wasn't really in the mood for that. She understood, but more importantly, they should try to gather information, and Cheyenne agreed that he could try. He sat down and asked to understand why he had been attacked by his own kind before, and Schwein began to explain everything that happened. According to him, killing his companions and letting the humans escape was discovered by the orc leader. He also opposed invading the surface and a human city, so Schwein ended up becoming a threat to everyone. Shan apologized, saying it was all their fault since he got so badly hurt, but Schwein smiled. After all, it was his own choice, nothing to worry about. He had been able to fight against the strongest of his own kind, but they kept coming at him non-stop. Thanks to that, he became even stronger than he was before. Cheyenne was impressed because Schwein didn't even seem to feel any attachment to his kind. Or rather, Schwein said that might be dangerous, but he also wanted to fight powerful people. That was a personal desire. Besides, he didn't mind as long as he could fight strong individuals. If Shin wanted, he could even help him fight the leader. He still didn't like the way his brothers were doing things, and the protagonist asked more about that. He asked if the orc leader was really his brother. Maybe he also had some kind of special power like Schwein. Schwein laughed because Cheyenne was clever like his brother. Looking closely, they even resembled each other quite a bit. But as Cheyenne had said earlier, Schwein's brother had a strange power that allowed him to give commands that couldn't be disobeyed by those he subdued. And among them, his brother was one of the weakest in terms of strength, but he was very clever. Before anyone noticed, he had become the leader of the tribe. This time too, his brother said something about letting everyone escape while drawing the humans' attention. There was also something about the invasion plan, but he didn't understand it very well. Cheyenne was shocked to hear that. He wondered if they had truly fallen into the orcs' trap by sending so many people at once. The guild's side didn't know there was a leader who was good at thinking and could create strategies. At this pace, the assault operation would end up facing problems. The protagonist intended to confirm it, but they would end up fighting his brother anyway and might be forced to kill him in front of Schwein. He asked if that was really okay, and Schwein agreed. After all, he wasn't obligated to protect his brother now. More important than that for them, strength was always absolute. Cheyenne could understand his determination and told the others that everyone was in danger. Cassandra asked if he had gotten any information, and the protagonist agreed, but unfortunately, it was the worst kind. Time was essential now. They could only keep moving while they walked, and they decided to head back. Meanwhile, the Argonauts Brigade, who had received the dispatch from the guild to carry out the quest, Jason and the others, were gathered. They were at the place where the main battle force of the stronger orcs was expected to be gathered. Jason was irritated, asking when they planned to show up. At this slow pace, the others would get ahead of them. Adelanda said they couldn't be careless while they didn't know where or how they might be attacked. But he was still furious and pointed out that they should ask the bats for directions. After all, she was a hunter, but couldn't even use animals to her advantage. Adelanda said that if she had her partner with her, she could have done that, but she couldn't speak with bats right now. Jason was still mad. If Shin were there, things wouldn't be going this badly. Medea asked him to calm down a little. To begin with, Jason complained because it was Medea who wanted to ban Cheyenne, and she replied that he was the one who said it was necessary. He kept yelling at her for shifting the blame. If that guy had really been trustworthy, he wouldn't have discarded him like that. Jason was furious. Their group was B rank, and even so, this was happening. They should have already found a way to move up to A rank. So to avoid losing any useful person, especially Cheyenne, now he regretted discarding him earlier. He had to admit they were at a disadvantage in terms of information, but when it came to combat power, they couldn't afford to lose. Jason was the hero, Medea the archmage with great magical power, Atalanta was a C-rank hunter, and Theseus had recently become a B-rank monster hunter. They had 4 gift bearers who were combat worthy, but Cheyenne had ended up getting involved with a new group, with a woman known as Cassandra. But if they had to fight on the front line, it was still complicated, because he would likely end up losing. Then Jason asked how things were going in the battle, and the other adventurers were relieved to see they had actually arrived. The others were struggling to capture the base, some squads had entered the interior, but the orcs were still far too strong. There was a massive one destroying everything in his path. They said a hero must face hardships and obstacles. Jason thought he was late, but it seemed fate had really decided to side with him. He would defeat the big guy alone. People could celebrate the debut of that fighting group's new awakening in their battle brigade. Jason shouted for everyone to listen closely to his words. He ordered them all to leave the battlefield in his group's hands. Meanwhile, Cassandra heard from Cheyenne that the chief was actually Schweine's brother and a pretty smart guy. And he was one of the weakest among the orcs, but he was also very intelligent. Cheyenne asked Schwein what kind of person his brother was. He said his brother was physically weak and wasn't treated well in their tribe. One day, while Schwein was out hunting, his brother was taken to hunt with another group. He didn't know what happened, but the people who took him started suddenly obeying his orders. Since then, his brother was always out hunting and living with the others. Cheyenne asked if he might have awakened his gift that day, and Schwein replied that it was quite possible. His power was something that allowed him to give orders that couldn't be refused. Since then, his brother, who was very calm, became more and more aggressive. For some reason, the number of companions obeying him only increased, and he started acting even more arrogant and bossy. Before they knew it, he was even controlling the former chief. He not only did whatever he wanted with the tribe, but also began saying that he wanted to conquer the surface someday. Schwein, who knew that the world outside was better than what those who had never left their village believed, opposed it. Cheyenne now understood why the relationship between the two had deteriorated, so that was when Schwein ended up being banished. Schwein asked him not to look at him like that, but Cheyenne couldn't help it, since they had ended up finding him again. But Schwein smiled, because now he could fight the chief again with all of his strength, and it wasn't all bad for him. However, Cassandra asked them to wait. The guild believed that the most powerful orc of all was the one leading them. Even if they destroyed the current forces, if they lowered their guard and the orcs invaded again, it would be extremely dangerous. Cheyenne agreed. They needed to kill the real chief no matter what, and meanwhile, the other adventurers were already engaged in battle. Jason didn't understand why they couldn't even break through the defenses of the low-level creatures with their attacks. They had reinforced their strength for this operation, and even so, things were turning out this way. Medea grew worried, but Jason knew all too well. He yelled at Theseus not to stand in front of his magic. He was trying, but in the middle of a battlefield, it was very difficult. Atalanta ended up getting blown away, and Jason told Theseus to heal her. He was too slow to be judging the situation. If it were Cheyenne, things might have turned out problematic. Jason was furious at the beasts that kept appearing one after another to attack them. Medea called out to Jason, and everyone cleared the way as she launched a massive blast of power at the large horde. They praised her, and now they could resume attacking, but Theseus said he hadn't finished healing yet. Jason told him to just get back to providing support afterward. They continued rushing forward to face the monsters. The other adventurers fighting farther ahead still seemed to be safe. Jason said they were there to help, and the others were relieved. They told them to protect Medea, and the adventurers trusted him since he managed to break through the horde. Jason was ready to face that enormous monster and become a true hero, and he charged at it immediately. The two fought while the other adventurers were amazed that Jason could hold off the giant alone. Medea said they would attack now and needed to be ready for what was coming. Jason felt he was being pushed back. His opponent was truly powerful. At that rate, he would be overwhelmed, but still, he wondered about that lingering feeling of unease. Maybe it was possible that the monster, who could barely think, was moving the orcs in a systematic way. Even so, he didn't know what might have happened if Shin had been there. He tried not to think too much about the absence of his former companion. Jason laughed because he felt that, at this pace, they would surely win and finish everything quickly. Medea fired a large magical blast at the monster, and everyone else wondered if they had hit it directly. But the orc was still standing perfectly, showing no sign of falling. It was shocking, as he had used his own companions as shields to defend against the magic. Even with Jason's continuous attacks trying to take him down, the orc was far too powerful, and Medea ended up being caught in the line of fire. Jason ran to try to save her, but his sword flew from his hands when a massive slash opened in front of him, leaving Medea to fall after protecting him. She stood there stunned while he collapsed to his knees, not understanding how things ended up that way. He was supposed to have been someone destined for greatness by the gods, and now he was falling into a pit like this at the hands of a mere orc. At the front lines, things would collapse too, but at the very least he wanted to make sure Medea could escape safely. That's when a wind spell struck the orc, and Jason wondered why Shion had arrived just now. The protagonist charged at the orc, accompanied by Cassandra and Swain, who had guided them through the path. Shan felt the ground tremble and wondered if it had been caused by a powerful spell. Cassandra said they were close and should keep going. They ran ahead and arrived just in time to see the light of the exit, as well as Jason taking a direct hit while protecting Midia. She screamed out in worry for Jason, and Cheyenne rushed in to save their lives using his magic too. He asked the others to leave it to him, then ran to check the condition of the adventurers while Cassandra and Schwein stood between them and the orc. Schwein had always wanted to fight him, and Cassandra told the orc chief that he truly was a worthy opponent. Shen ran to check if Midia was still alive and asked Lime, who hesitated to take care of the man. But since it was his request, she would yield just this once. The Orc King declared that all humans should die and ordered everyone to get out of his way and kill the rest. The command continued to echo, and Cheyenne heard it all the time as he borrowed Midia's staff to fight. His magic began to be absorbed by the large staff before firing a powerful wave of attacks against the approaching horde of orcs. Cassandra was impressed because he was using powerful magic and also cast her fire spell. While she was handling that, Cheyenne told Medea to retreat immediately as he would carry Jason himself. Outside, Cheyenne felt his magical power was unstable due to the previous attack, but he urgently needed to heal Jason. Adelinda approached, shocked to see Cheyenne there. He felt relieved because the others had arrived in time, but they could see Jason's condition was indeed serious. The protagonist explained that he had been using Lime's skill to control the bleeding, but was now out of magical energy. He then asked Theseus if he could assist with healing, as Cheyenne stood up to ask about their situation outside. They informed him that their rear was secure with support from inside, and Cassandra and Schwein were managing the front, but they weren't sure if assistance was needed. That's why they needed to find the demon's great commander. The others became confused because they thought that large orc was already the leader. But now they understood that a gift holder was orchestrating everything from behind. It was difficult to believe at first, and the adventurers were shocked. Cheyenne explained that he had used his translation gift directly on the orc they were fighting earlier to uncover this. The others weren't sure whether to trust the protagonist, but Schwein's ongoing battle served as proof, so Cheyenne advised them not to attack him. The orcs continued fighting, and Schwein acknowledged that his opponent was indeed the strongest of them all. Still, it wasn't enough, and Cassandra tried to assist, but again her attacks were being dodged. While the two fought, another orc observed, wondering what was wrong with that human because the situation was dire. He then ordered an attack on Cassandra and to capture Schwein as well. That was when Sheehan found the true leader of the orc group. Cheyenne called for Atalanta, who prepared to shoot at the orc standing among the others and commanding them. Thus, they shot at the orc, who fell after the shot, but Atalanta clarified it wasn't like that. She had missed afterward. However, Cheyenne responded that the orc must still have been injured, so he directed the other adventurers to attack the true commander. Everyone charged in that direction, and the commander yelled for the others to protect him, but soon they managed to defeat the gift holder. With that, all the orcs stopped moving, confused about what had happened and why they had been doing those things. This allowed Schwein and Cassandra to strike hard and defeat him, with Cassandra confirming they had taken down the strongest orc demon lord. Afterward, the rest prepared to defeat the remaining orcs as revenge for their injured and fallen companions. Meanwhile, Cassandra approached Cheyenne, who checked if she was safe, as the true leader was still fleeing after having his staff stolen. He couldn't believe it. He should have won by neutralizing the mage who discovered him, yet suddenly this had happened. He completely ignored the Great Orc Chief and ran towards the leader, who probably possessed a power similar to his own. He was able to swap places with another orc during the chaos of the battle and evacuated before anyone had time to react. Once he returned to his base, he could rebuild his forces, and those idiots had only proved that humans could be defeated by using his commands. Then there was that unforgivable traitor. He was his brother, yet he dared to defy him by using his powers to control others. He thought Schwein, of all people, would stand by him and wondered if this was the real revenge for his banishment. To think Schwein would side with the enemy who defeated him, allowing them to do as they pleased despite having once forgotten his past kindness. But though he had walked far, Cassandra and Cheyenne were already on the other side, exactly as predicted. Cassandra was surprised because he really had fled earlier, and Cheyenne mentioned it was merely a gamble. But it was good that it had worked, even if by chance, and yet the orc leader still couldn't understand why they were there. That guy was the one who shot at him. Cheyenne didn't think that a goblin with intelligence like his could be so troublesome. And there was the girl fighting the former chief. Even so, he was confused because he could understand Cheyenne's words. It was obvious that he was planning something, but his luck was about to run out, and the protagonist kept saying it was over for the orc. There were no pawns left to protect him, and he wouldn't let him escape. But the orc was planning something else. He would show all the fear he could. Human's weakness was having feelings that could be manipulated. That's why he begged them to help him take revenge, claiming he didn't do any of that because he wanted to. He bowed, saying he had no choice. Cheyenne knew the orc must be similar to himself, desperate to survive, and therefore did whatever was necessary to move forward. To live and survive, he asked if the orc could truly swear never to do such things again. The orc smiled inwardly, always knowing that humans were huge fools, and replied, promising that he would do so. Cheyenne decided to tell him something good. His ability also allowed him to read true intentions, shocking the monster. Immediately, the orc stood up furiously, realizing Cheyenne was playing with him, and the protagonist struck him down with a blow. Cassandra praised him, saying he did a really good job, and asked if this was truly the chief. Cheyenne confirmed, mentioning he'd even prepared a copy to escape. If left alone, he wouldn't be much of a threat, but he was smarter than initially expected. Cassandra asked if Cheyenne wasn't going to say something like if things were different, he could have ended up like him. After all, Cheyenne had also awakened a gift, struggling to survive with a weak power just like him. Cheyenne replied it wasn't like that, and she sighed deeply, clearly stating that Guy had used his men merely as pawns, nothing more. Cheyenne and that monster were completely different. If that were the case, Cheyenne would have turned her into a pawn as well. But on the contrary, he said Cassandra was his partner. Meanwhile, the other monster used his gift only for himself, but Cheyenne used his gift to help others. They were nothing alike, and those words left the protagonist somewhat surprised. She became nervous because he stayed too quiet. It was embarrassing to keep talking if he didn't plan to respond. Cheyenne smiled, thanking her and praising Cassandra for being the best partner ever. She blushed in embarrassment and changed the subject, saying everyone else was returning and they needed to move on. They also had to collect the monster stones and soon returned to meet up with Lime and Schwain. Schwain realized that his brother had ultimately failed at everything. Cheyenne wanted to say something about it too, but Schwain said they'd fought each other before and his brother lost. That's all there was to it. Still, when Schwain was just little, his brother had shared his meat with him, and that meat was indeed delicious. Before gaining his power, his brother had a good heart. Cheyenne didn't know how to handle the rest, but would leave it in the orc's hands. The two decided they wouldn't forget the promise they'd made earlier, agreeing they could return another time. Back at the Adventurers Guild Tavern, everyone was celebrating after successfully completing the subjugation. Now everyone could celebrate drinking and eating freely, and they all toasted with their alcoholic beverages. In the middle of this, several girls approached Cheyenne curiously because he had Lime on his shoulder, which they found rather adorable. Lime apologized because he was already taken, and Cheyenne was surprised seeing him practically throwing himself at the girls. The girls hugged the slime because he was friendly and actually very cute, and of course, Lime was in a good mood. He was quite happy because it was an ideal situation, while she sighed, amazed at Lime's behavior. However, the protagonist became curious because earlier he thought Lime shouldn't understand human language without speaking to him. Cassandra appeared asking why Cheyenne was suddenly blushing, but he himself was surprised because her face was also red. She started laughing, saying she was drunk and wouldn't tell him, and pointed out that Cheyenne should drink a little and have fun too. Still, it was unexpected for Cheyenne. He thought Cassandra wouldn't enjoy that sort of thing. But actually, she used to do such things occasionally, though nobody approached to talk to her back then, so she always ended up a bit lonely. Cheyenne replies that it was probably just because she was very beautiful, and they didn't have the courage to talk to someone like her. She feels embarrassed and turns her face away because he suddenly said such things. There was no need for that. Yet he compliments her again, saying she looked beautiful in the clothes she was wearing that day as well, making Cassandra embarrassed once more because he was saying those things again. But she thanks him for the compliment anyway, and that's when several adventurers approach her to talk. They all wanted to know how her battle against the orc leader went because they heard it was impressive. They were also mentioning that she defeated the black orc and even made him part of her company. Cheyenne realizes that these people were from the vanguard and admires her strength. Everyone was so surprised and impressed because she also had a good appearance. There were even too many people trying to speak with her. Then Cheyenne waves, deciding to leave her alone to enjoy the experience, even though she was a bit nervous. On his way, he ends up seeing Angelina talking to another person and waves at her because he wanted to report something to her about the operation earlier. She agrees and apologizes to the adventurer, heading towards Cheyenne and thanking him because he saved her from a persistent person. He says obviously it was just because she was very beautiful, and Angelina couldn't care less since he probably said the same thing to everyone, including Cassandra and even Pollux. He was always surrounded by girls, which shocked Cheyenne a little to hear. Then she laughs, saying she was just kidding, but heard that Cheyenne had actually done a great job this time. She was also happy because he wasn't just talk, and Cheyenne thanks her a bit nervously, but says it was all thanks to Angelina's and the guild's support. The protagonist gets curious to know what happened to Jason, and she replies that his initial treatment went well, and he safely declined further assistance. Therefore, Jason refused to participate in the victory celebration, which made Shin sigh slightly in relief. Angelina mentions it was decided that Cheyenne was the MVP of that battle since he contributed the most to the operation. He still doesn't think he did anything too important. If Cassandra and the others hadn't been there, it wouldn't have been able to defeat the Orc Lord. In fact, Cassandra's performance was the best among everyone, but Angelina responds that without Schwein's words, things would have ended worse. The discovery of the true leader was Shan's accomplishment. Leading monsters and forming a team with them to help in the subjugation was impressive. That was something only an S-rank adventurer called a Demon Lord would normally do in such situations. Shen feels they were all praising him a bit too much. Besides, he wasn't the person who truly led them. Lime and Schwein were handling everything with their own strength, and Angelina insists she wasn't overestimating him at all. She herself always found him very impressive, knowing how hard he'd been working to get stronger. And thanks to that, he was able to discover the true orc leader, allowing them to achieve victory without causing any other problems. Therefore, he could indulge himself a little and openly say he accomplished something and defeated the orc boss. Cheyenne was slightly impressed by her words, until suddenly the other receptionist called Angelina's attention because she needed to speak with her. She sighs, realizing she'd have to leave things for another opportunity, but whispers they could go out to eat sometime soon. Cheyenne sighs, feeling he narrowly avoided something worse, but not long afterward, Pollux approaches to talk as well. She was annoyed because Cheyenne hadn't even called her to talk, and he replies that he'd feel bad interrupting her conversation with the others. But she insists it was fine as long as it was him and invites him for a drink together. Cheyenne asks what they were talking about now, even though he clearly knows Pollux was drunk. She says she wanted to talk about her hero. Cheyenne understands since everyone should have a hero they admire, and asks who this adventurer might be. Pollux replies that was a secret, but more importantly, thanks him for helping them in the cave. At that time, she really thought it was the end. Cheyenne sighs because it was actually pure luck, and he was very worried about her. She gets emotional hearing this and hugs him, apologizing because maybe she was a bit too drunk right now. Pollux always wanted to tell Cheyenne something important and asks him to listen. Just then, Castor interrupts, calling his sister. He was also drunk, questioning what she was doing, saying none of it was decent. Besides, if she was drunk, she should lean on him instead of someone else. At the same moment, she knocks him down with a strike because he was an idiot who interrupted her at such an important time. Castor stays on the ground complaining about the pain, and Cheyenne asks what Pollux meant, but she decides it would be better to explain another time. Cassandra appears this time, irritated because Cheyenne left her behind and kept chasing after other women. He seemed quite brave to do something like that. He didn't understand why she was suddenly angry, as he obviously wasn't trying to flirt with anyone else. She intended to fix his attitude with a small fight, but that's when Shin woke up the next day and opened the window. He wondered how he ever thought he could win with a partner like that and ended up unconscious shortly afterward. A few days after the incident with the orc, the guild returned to its normal operations and Cheyenne decided to take on a mission just because, even though he didn't expect to use any of the skills he had. Entering the cave was also allowed again, and they could resume fulfilling their promise to explore the dungeons. The time had finally come, and he would be counting on Cassandra's help inside. She was already familiar with Schwein's abilities. There was no chance of losing now, and they apologized for leaving him waiting, but at least they asked how his injuries were. He replied that he was tired of waiting and almost thought of going after them. If it were his end, he'd accept it, but at least they could focus on fighting quickly. Lime asks Cheyenne if this fight had any meaning, as she didn't want any of them getting hurt. Cheyenne responds that they had made a promise. Schwein had fulfilled his part, and now they needed to do the same. And for Schwein, fighting strong opponents was the best reward he could have. It was a shame because Cassandra ended up in this position. But Cassandra says he didn't mean to worry about that. She herself was excited and had been seeking exactly such a fight. Cassandra had used two abilities, Future Sight and Flaming Sword, would face Schwein's physical fortification and his gift called Berserker. It was impossible to predict who was superior. Besides, the two had fought together before and knew each other's abilities well. How they were about to fight now was very important, and Cheyenne wondered who would make the first move. They both moved simultaneously, making Lion feel dizzy because of how quickly they moved. Cassandra, making the first move, chose offensive movements, but if she continued pressuring him like this, things would change eventually. Schwein's Berserker would activate, allowing him to counterattack. Cheyenne wondered what Cassandra could do at that moment. Schwein laughed because she was really good. If she were from his tribe, he might even want to marry her. Cassandra apologized because she couldn't understand what he was saying, but it was clear she was really enjoying herself. Eventually, Schwein kicked the sword away, as he had no intention of continuing to fight the same way as before. But Cassandra had predicted that too, and they continued exchanging blows until Schwein eventually fell after a final move. If Cassandra didn't inflict a fatal strike and only knocked him out, he wouldn't be able to enter Berserker mode, and that marked the end of the battle. After everything, Schwein acknowledged that he had completely lost, but he was in good spirits at the end and had no regrets. Cassandra asked Cheyenne to translate, so the protagonist asked Schwein if he couldn't at least have waited until his wounds healed. Schwein asked if he was really curious about it. Actually, his hand had originally been cut off by his partner. It was too convenient to just wait until he was at his maximum potential to fight, so he chose to proceed anyway. Schwein said if they were satisfied, they could kill him now. If released, he would attack any humans who entered, and obviously, they didn't want that. Lime had a request, and Cassandra did as well. Cheyenne knew exactly what both of them were thinking now. So he told Schwein that if he promised not to attack humans, maybe things could change. But Schwein replied that would be impossible. As he had said before, his reason for living was solely to fight powerful opponents. He had no intention of living if he had to give that up. Cheyenne realized that even if he wasn't abandoned, there was no path of coexistence between them. Cheyenne mentioned how Schwein wanted to face strong opponents, but they didn't necessarily have to be humans. He responded yes, but only humans appeared there, so there wasn't much he could do about it. Cheyenne said that would be true at least as long as he stayed inside that cave, so he asked Schwein to accompany them. Schwein was surprised as Cheyenne explained that they were adventurers aiming for the highest rank. They went to various places to fulfill other requests, and in these locations there were many powerful opponents who surpassed Cassandra as well. Schwein asks if it was really okay, since he was from a different race. Cheyenne replies that if that was the problem, they already had Lime. Many adventurers saw him fighting against the former chief. Nobody in their guild had such impressions. Schwein could understand this and asks if they could really take him outside. Cheyenne agrees, offering his hand so they can experience the outside world together. On another occasion, Cheyenne went to meet Angelina, who was surprised to see that the protagonist arrived early. Cheyenne froze because she should still be working, but she responds that actually her coworker had taken her shift that day. Angelina laughs because he looked quite surprised, but actually it was because casual clothes suited her. Before he thought Angelina looked like some kind of noble lady, Angelina becomes nervous because it was rare for him to see her without her work clothes. Cheyenne comments on how she always seemed busy, and she remembers how he also seemed busy since he was working towards a promotion. The protagonist agrees it was true he was there that day, but it was all thanks to Angelina and that other person. That other person brought good old memories to her. In the past, they were all always together. She was thinking they might go to another store, and Cheyenne agrees. They finally decide to walk together. In fact, if it weren't for that other person, things would be very different. Everything started back then when there were just 3 adventurers. It was the rank E group composed of Jason, Cheyenne, and another girl. Jason, as usual, was always showing off even after finishing a simple quest. The girl complained because Jason was always loud and very rude to the staff. Cheyenne asked them both to calm down. Then he asked Angelina if they could deliver the items they collected. She agreed because she could reward them for the things they had gathered. Behind Angelina, after the adventurer group had left, another girl commented that those 3 were gift bearers, and that would eventually become quite troublesome. The girl was Jessica, and Angelina was surprised to see her there, wanting to know if she needed something so suddenly. Jessica laughs because Angelina was always giving that cold look, despite worrying so much about her dedicated coworker. She even wanted to give her a good massage, though it seemed to have other intentions, and laughs because Angelina flinched. She offers a drink as an apology. It was a new product that was gaining popularity for relieving fatigue. Angelina was quite surprised because it looked like some kind of tea and had a very unique smell, but promises she would try drinking it. Actually, she was worried. There was Jason, the hero, and the girl who was the goddess of medicine. She could understand why those 2 wanted to become adventurers. But there was also the boy with the power of translation. He had received a gift that wasn't very suitable for becoming an adventurer. Angelina didn't understand why that boy decided to form a team with the other 2. Jessica suggests that she could ask him directly instead of just wondering. That was when Shin appeared, surprising her. Angelina asks what she could do for him, and the boy shows some items for her to see. Both were surprised, especially Jessica, because all those seemed like rare items that were rarely collected in quests. She asks how he managed to get such a quantity of things. Cheyenne stutters, clarifying he didn't steal any of it. As a guild member, she should know about his gift. The animals he befriended told him about it. Jessica understood because it was indeed a convenient skill, but Cheyenne felt it was also quite troublesome. Because after all, he had to negotiate with them every single time he would sell these items and apply himself to adventurer training. Jessica comments on how he completed his first request and obtained rare materials. It was indeed a good start. Cheyenne becomes surprised and asks if he could really join the adventurer training. Jessica says she noticed it during his first quest. To start alongside his 2 companions, he needed more power, so Cheyenne just wanted to gain more knowledge. But he couldn't fight like Jason and couldn't provide powerful support like Asura did. That was why he needed to work hard. And seeing this determination, Jessica says she didn't dislike serious people and asks if he could speak with monsters as well. Cheyenne says if they were capable of communication, then yes. That was how Jessica ended up agreeing with Angelina that he was indeed troublesome. It was certainly advantageous for obtaining information, but the kind of issues that could arise if an adventurer was seen talking to a monster would be complicated. Angelina felt everyone would become confused, and Jessica agrees, saying it was very possible they might mistake Cheyenne for a monster in disguise. They might think he wasn't actually a gifted individual, but an imposter who could be attacked from behind. Cheyenne nervously asks what he should do at such moments, and Jessica gestures for him to keep listening. What he had to do now was simple: spread a good impression to others and earn people's trust. He also needed to make as many allies as possible. Angelina says there was no emergency mission right now, so they wondered what they should do. Actually, Angelina remembers something, and Jessica says that adventurers, the guild, and this city were things they could teach Cheyenne about. That's because Jessica was also a rank C adventurer, and he could become her assistant to build some reputation through his actions. Cheyenne became excited and asked them to let him do it, and thus, the days quickly passed. On the days when there was no work at the Argonaut Brigade, he followed Jessica everywhere. She was a hard worker. She taught Cheyenne many things, and perhaps because she was a solo adventurer, she had a long list of contacts. A year passed and their ranks increased. Cheyenne's reputation also improved, and Jason celebrated because they finally reached rank D. It took longer than Jason expected, but with his power and sword, they could quickly achieve rank A. Then he told Cheyenne to stop being weak all the time and start training seriously as well. The protagonist agrees, but without the connections he made, he wouldn't have even obtained that sword from before. At least his efforts weren't wasted. Asu mentioned that Cheyenne was certainly growing too, which made him smile. Asu says that meant there would be more work and even more problems, but he respected Cheyenne's determination. Jason grumbles because he heard that one of Angelina's team members had died anyway, and Cheyenne asks him to stop saying cruel things. After all, he should know that from rank D onwards, the difficulty of quests increased, and that's why incidents like this still happened. Jason still didn't want to hear that from Cheyenne, so he just walked away because he needed to do his part and work too. At some point, Cheyenne felt he had fallen asleep. Jessica had encouraged him to drink, and he realized his head felt heavy. Nearby, Jessica apologizes to Angelina for what happened, and Cheyenne wonders what the two of them were talking about. Angelina mentioned that the two were enthusiastic rank D adventurers, saying they could achieve even more from now on. Jessica asked her not to worry because it wasn't her fault. She knew it wasn't, but Angelina still didn't want to see anyone else dying. Jessica asks if she couldn't just abandon her work, and Angelina grumbles because she couldn't do that. It was her job, and people relied on her. Jessica says there were still many people who had been saved by her work, so she could have confidence. Still, Angelina begs Jessica not to die, and Jessica promises she would never do that, as she had saved all the money she wanted. It seemed she'd finally be able to open her own shop. She couldn't die even if she wanted to. Angelina felt happy and asked if she could at least tell Cheyenne and the others about her achievements and first customers. Jessica left, and after that, Cheyenne, who was rising as an adventurer, was assigned to work as a new instructor for novice adventurers. He became quite busy, and the three of them rarely spent time together, but Angelina ended up being promoted again, and Cheyenne's mornings were filled up completely. But during that time, Cheyenne started having a bad feeling and saw Pollux running toward him asking for help. That was because Jessica had been seriously injured. The guild was in chaos, and Cheyenne immediately ran toward the guild. Even Angelina and her attendant companion were shocked when they saw Jessica's condition, severely wounded. When Cheyenne arrived, he felt relieved to see Angelina. He had heard from someone else that she was there and hurried over. She said she was fine and that he could go home, but she was clearly shaken by everything that happened. Cheyenne replied that he couldn't just leave someone behind like this and wanted at least to listen to her, but she told him to shut up. She started crying, saying it was okay. In the end, Cheyenne was an adventurer and would eventually die too. That's why Angelina didn't want him to be nice to her or even get close, but Cheyenne said he wouldn't die. She called him a liar because Laya, Hayes, and Gina had all said the same things and had died as well. Even Jessica, who said she would be fine, could die at any moment. Cheyenne slowly approached and promised he wouldn't die. He had the knowledge and experience he'd learned from others, so he hoped she would believe him. But still, she was nervous. All they did was send adventurers out on missions, and they cruelly lost their lives. Everyone risked their lives, and all she could do was pray to God. Cheyenne replied that wasn't true at all. Because Angelina carefully selected and chose suitable people for each request, they could go on adventures with peace of mind. When difficult or painful times came, remembering her smile always gave them strength. That's why Cheyenne asked her not to say things like she couldn't do anything, which made her cry again. When Jessica returned, she laughed because she really thought she was going to die, but even Angelina and Cheyenne felt embarrassed. Still, Angelina was very happy because Jessica was safe, and Jessica laughed, saying she had made a big promise to her. Her adventurer days were over, but she planned to open her shop whenever she wanted and enjoy her second life. She had a shop quite popular among girls and asked if the other people there were also related to Cheyenne. When they turned around, because Cheyenne and Angelina were on a date at Jessica's shop, behind them were Cassandra, Lime, and Schween pretending to act casual. Cassandra stammered, saying they just happened to see the two and thought they'd be bothering if they interrupted. Cheyenne asked Jessica if there was anything else they could order for everyone to eat, and she laughed because he really had grown up. Jessica said she'd arrange something as long as Cheyenne took care of the seats, and everyone raised their glasses to celebrate the success of the emergency operation. They all spent the evening together, and Jessica was surprised because Cheyenne had found new companions who seemed like good people. Angelina agreed, even though she found it somewhat curious that making friends with monsters was taken so seriously. Despite the achievements of the emergency operation, even she was surprised that her superiors approved the cases of Lime and Schween. Angelina agrees, saying it was actually quite difficult, and Jessica asked Cheyenne if he had decided on a name for his adventurer team. The protagonist realized he hadn't done it yet, and they eventually decided on Legion, which Cheyenne thought sounded good. Lime agreed as well, even though she didn't fully understand the point, but she liked the strong sound of the word. That night, they all enjoyed themselves before Cheyenne thought about eventually finding the home of those monsters. However, the protagonist was caught by surprise because there was someone standing in front of their house, and he wondered who it was. He heard from a rat that this person had been there for quite some time, and Cheyenne observed the staff, wondering who it could be. But as he approached, he realized it was Asu. She removed her hood, calling Cheyenne an idiot for making her wait there for such a long time. He was shocked to see her again. Asu asked if it was true that he had left Jason's team, and Cheyenne was surprised because he thought she already knew. She simply hugged him, but suddenly noticed the scent of another woman, asking what that meant, leaving Cheyenne frozen in shock. But more importantly, he wanted to know why she was near his home, and Asu said it was because she wanted to ask something of Cheyenne. Asu wanted Cheyenne to come with her to the village of the Gorgons, which definitely caught him off guard. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.